In this conversation, Professor Henri Bezuidenhout of the School of Economics, Northwest University, tells us about the importance of being able to work between cultures. He teaches us about the different building blocks that makes up culture. For example, people of different cultures have different views on how we make decisions, how we follow rules, and how we interact with people in leadership positions, and how we react to difficult life events like illness and death. Being aware of what cultural differences are gives us a deeper understanding of ourselves and others, and helps us to respond in line with how others see the world. This has great value for how we practice presence in nursing. Please join us in reflecting on this important topic.
So the history of cultural models starts with Geert Hofstede in the 1970s. He sort of, from anthropology, derived culturally that there's four main dimensions that sort of highlights cultural differences. Dimension number one is called identity. It's individualism versus collectivism. So just please remember, culture is a scale. It's not you are an individualist or a collectivist. You fall somewhere in a spectrum. It will always be you relating to another person. Somebody is either more collectivist than you or more individualistic than you. Or you expect, for instance, the Afrikaans-speaking people to be more individualistic than the Indian South Africans. So stepping back from that, that's number one, but you really will find that sort of influences all the other dimensions. That's why it's so important. Then the next one is called power distance. It's how comfortable we are with differences. And, you know, everybody has got this thing that we want to be egalitarian, but yet if Cyril Ramaphosa walks into the room, everybody, even whether you like him or not, he's still the president. So we are all, to a degree, there is a hierarchy. There's always a hierarchy in society. Even if, sort of, if you look at, once again, the more Western thing, which is called low power distance, there is still an unwritten hierarchy. You know, there's still the CEO of the company, although you can shout at him and call him names and you won't be fired for it. At the end of the day, he still has to sign your paycheck. So there is a built-in pecking order. It's just how we express it. Now, the current cultures that express it explicitly means that, once again, of course, you must make sure that you always talk to people on the right level. If you want to communicate, if you communicate too low, the person is overwhelmed because he knows you're on a higher, in his eyes, you're in a higher position. Why are you talking to him? If you talk to somebody above you, they go like, why are you talking to me? You should be talking. So, especially cultures like the Japanese and so have literally got software that figures out who should be talking to whom in corporate relations. That's the extreme of power distance. And in South Africa, we have a mix. There's also a generational thing. The older generations tend to be much more hierarchical than the newer generations. The next one is called uncertainty avoidance, which is about uncertainty avoidance, not risk. So as I usually use the example of, if you think of the manual of a Chinese product, it's usually very thin, it's fairly sketchy, and you'll figure it out, versus if you buy a German product, you get an entire encyclopedia with it that will explain everything. So it's how much are we trying to control our environment? The uncertainty avoidant people will try to really make sure everything is in order, and the low uncertainty avoidance means we'll take it as it comes and we'll sort it out. The last one in the initial model is called masculine versus feminine, and that causes a lot of problems with people that have ideological points of view. So please note, this is the 1970s. It is an old Dutch professor that brought this up. So many newer translations say this is competition versus cooperation. But the science behind it is Where competition and cooperation is wide apart, countries like the United States and the UK, it's called more masculine. While where countries where there is almost the same levels of cooperation and competition is considered to be feminine. So it's not versus, it's sort of what is in Hofstede's dimension then is more where competition and cooperation exist on an equal level. Scandinavian countries, a lot of the African countries, you'll find more feminine, it's called more feminine. While there's this huge drive for personal achievement and success at the expense of the cooperation, that would be called masculine. So make of that what you will. Don't crucify me for citing Geert Hofstede. Following him came von Strompenaars. Now, von Strompenaars, his fallout with Hofstede is yes, you're using this terminology, but it's the Dutch meaning.
Okay.
It's if you go to the Dutch book and you ask what's masculine, that's what it's defined. That doesn't mean that's how all cultures perceive. So he changed it, for instance, collectivism, and his word is communitarianism. A slight slant, but the big thing Fons introduced to us, first of all, is universalism versus particularism. And in South Africa, that's very important. You'll find that most of your colonial world today is particularist, because the attitude is, who made the rules? Is it relevant for me? Why should I follow it? It nobody I voted for or chose made these rules. Well, if you look at, once again, the Germans are a good example. There's one rule and everybody has to follow it.
Sure.
We don't care who you are. The example they always use, therefore, and you can think of this in the nursing setup, is around schools, the traffic speed is limited to 50 kilometers an hour. You're driving with a friend, he's driving 70, passing a school, and he hits a child. You were the only other person that saw this. What will you tell the judge?
Well, I will tell the truth.
So yeah, that's sort of a very Western European, almost, von Strompenaars will always tell the joke, that's a very Protestant, Christian, Northern European way. God is watching and God knows what happened. The Catholic center of Europe will say, well, I would lie to the judge to protect my friend, and then I'll go to confession afterwards. If you go into Latin America and Africa, it's like, well, prison is a bad place. I'm not letting my friend spend place in prison, so I'm going to lie to the judge. And actually, the worst country is Korea, because it's sort of, I need to protect my friend.
Okay, yes.
And that is sort of, does one rule apply for all or not?
Mm.
And you'll find in South Africa, people are, unfortunately, even Afrikaans South Africans and English South Africans tend to be a bit more particularist. We will say, well, that law doesn't really apply to me.
Yes.
Well, how can we work around it?
Yeah.
His other one that he brought, a sort of competition versus cooperation debate, he has ascription, which is more of, do I have my achievement as a result of my relationships or due to my actual performance? His time he introduced sort of, are we working on clock time or are we working on event time? So once again, countries that went through the Industrial Revolution, where people had to clock into work, there's sort of the sequential thing that things happen in a day. You know, the meeting starts at 8, at 8:30, I've got a quick 5-minute break. At 25 to 9, I have to phone someone. You schedule your day according to the clock. Now that's also, once again, sort of limited to a very specific part of the world. The rest of the world, you can think of a country like India. If we have scheduled a meeting for 9 o'clock, how do you guarantee that you'll be there at 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Almost impossible for anybody to. So we will start when most people are there.
Okay.
So yes, it's called African time in Africa.
Yes.
So I always joke with people, there's a difference between African time and Zuma time. The previous President Zuma used to be 3 hours late for a meeting. That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
But so what if someone is 15 minutes late? If most people are there, we start the social contract sort of is, well, if you're late, you need to catch on. Well, obviously, in a clock time world, people will first stop and sort of say, why are you late?
Yes.
And really, it's the event time thing is also relationship driven. So I've got my meeting with you, but now as I leave home, I see my neighbor's got a flat tire. My neighbor is more important than you, so I'm quickly going to help him. I'm going to take him to Super Quick. We're going to get his tire fixed. Then I sort of, as I drive back, my mother phones and she says she's run out of sugar. Well, once again, my mother is more important than you, so now I will get to you.
Yes.
But in the relationship picking order, you're not that high up. And you can think we all do that to a lesser or more extent. You know, if you suddenly realize your children has got a problem of school, you're going to ask the people at work, I have to go now. Depending on the severity, but usually you will put that, or once again, as I use the example, you realize, for instance, at 12 o'clock, the president is coming for a speech. You will make sure you're there at 12 o'clock.
Yes. Yeah.
But if I say you the mayor of Ventersdorp is going to have a speech, well, maybe you.
Yeah. Depends
on
what
other
he's going
things.
to
Don't
say. Yeah.
do that based on relationship. It's just in the clock time world, really the clock has been introduced in sort of the measure of time. The last thing Fons introduced was sort of the neutral versus affective cultures. To understand that, really, I would suggest anybody to go on YouTube and look at the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, the news clips, how did the people handle it, versus, I can't remember the hurricane's name, 2007 in America in New Orleans, and how that had. You will see the Japanese almost look like nothing has happened. That doesn't mean they're not feeling emotion, but they're not expressing it. In the neutral world, showing your emotion is weakness. Well, of course, in the American, you'll see people crying and openly shouting, and that's called affective. In that world, holding your emotions back is weakness. So now imagine you're working with a very affective person and you're neutral. You're thinking like, this guy's like a child. Meanwhile, he's thinking you're like a child.
Yes.
But once again, coming back to our concept of presence, so if you are present, you know, oh, that's just how he expresses himself.
And to allow that and give space for that.
You don't show your emotions. He was taught, show you your emotions.
Yes. And
later models, people have sort of reworked it to be more politically correct, if you want to like that. Erin Meyer in a book Culture Map brought a lot of subtle differences in, like in communication, as you know, how do you give negative feedback? I think is an important one. So always say call it the sandwich, you know, especially in the individualist world, there's like, we tell you how good you are, then we give a little bad news, and then we once again remind you how good you are. If you think of sort of African cultures, those slices of bread is very, very thick. You almost, because that's, if you take it to, in the collectivist mind, if I criticize you, I'm criticizing the entire group.
Okay.
Never just insult one person, because collectivism is us. So you are sort of, the danger there is, if I criticize you, I'm criticizing your group, but I'm also dishonoring you in front of your group.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's, for instance, if you think of, culturally speaking, why anybody will tell you, especially countries like China, Japan, and so on, if you really insulted somebody, they will never speak to you again. There's nothing you can do to rectify that. That's why I'm understanding that it's so important. So, and then on the other side, there's sort of the French approach of what sandwich? Why the hell did you do this? Sort it out. I've never seen somebody done such bad work. Now let's go and have a beer. So it's they separated the criticism from the person. But you can think in the collectivist mind there's no separation.
Yes.
And of course in the sort of the American Anglo model, it's sort of, I still need to make you feel good about yourself.
Okay. Yeah. So that aspect needs to come in.
And I think especially that comes up for me because the nursing people I know, especially in hospital management, I tend in high stress situation, people start shouting at one another.
Yes.
And it's not to take it personally.
Yes.
Sort of in the broader coaching environment, what I work with people is you must realize it's never about you. It's sort of a saying, whatever you feel and think or say about me has got nothing to do with me. It's your interpretations, it's your perspectives, it's your biases. Because if you go to an integral frame of thinking, what do you know about me?
Yes, and how do you know what I'm thinking and what my motivations are?
Yeah, so you can't, it's your perception.
Yes.
Yeah, so that I won't start there when working with presence, but it's good to sort of make that rule. It's never about me.
Yes. No, I see your point. It's so valid. Self-knowledge and understanding of culture is such a hugely important thing, because if I understand who the person or what the person in front of me prefer and how they think, or if I have an idea about that, then I will know what is seen as respectful and what is seen as disrespectful. And I will also understand my team members better if I understand what their culture is and what their preferences are. So I think it's so important that we have this knowledge and apply it in nursing.
Yeah, coming to mind and talking about it, is sort of Aaron Meyer also puts that there's a thing called comfort with silence. How long does it take between when I shut up and you start speaking? So once again, starting in the Far East, countries like Japan, after I speak, there'll be sort of half a minute of silence when we both reflect before we say something else. Your sort of mostly European mindset is, I've got certain words that I will say I'm going to stop now, and the moment I stop, you will start speaking. That will be considered respectful. Now, your South American, African cultures, even to an extent the Arab culture is geared, cultures are sort of geared that there's certain words that you use that I'm sort of saying, I'm coming to the end, but you must start speaking. So there's going to be an overlap. I'm still speaking, but you're also speaking. Sort of handing over the baton without that. And you can think that that also causes a lot of frustration because somebody will start speaking while you're speaking and you're thinking it's disrespectful. Or alternatively, they've just stopped speaking and is now just sitting and reflecting. And then you get uncomfortable and feel like, I've got to say something.
Yes. Now that's so interesting. And that also makes me think about if we have basic principles for communication, for being respectful, how valid are those rules or guidelines if we take this principle in mind, keep it in mind? So we actually then, if we think from a cultural viewpoint, we can throw those a bit out the window and really see the person in front of us and get to know them and what they try to understand. Why is this person interrupting me? They see that as respectful, or why is this person not saying anything? If we understand that,
you sort of mentioned the sort of rules and stuff. I hope you don't want to put this into some manual. Yeah, the real way, as far as I see to handle it, is at least at a regular interval, have a team talk. Where people discuss it, so that, because it's always me to you. So we can have a rule that says, when dealing with Botswana people, take note of the following.
Okay, yes.
It's not going to work. Rather, once every 3 months, we're going to have a team discussion where we are going to go through cultural frameworks and just see where we are at. What do we understand? Because obviously there's a difference between some of these real personal issues. That doesn't mean it's a cultural issue. Being culturally sensitive, you'll know when to say, well, we can work with that as well.
Thank you so much. I think you have given us much to think about and to go and apply and see. And that's a wonderful message of how we can take culture into consideration when we are a nurse and want to give the best care. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to participate in your channel.
Thank you.